Hello, and thank you for the invitation to talk to you tonight. This is the third time I'm talking to the native plant group. I visited first, and then we recorded a video for the composting. And tonight we're just going to talk about how to make compost and the importance of compost in improving the soil. I'm a master gardener with Harris County Master Gardeners, and of course I love the soil and composting. Those are my favorite topics, along with trees and grass. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully if you don't have a compost going on by the end of the presentation, you might still have a few minutes of sunlight. You can go outside and start one. So that would be a great goal. These are just ways for you to contact us. And if you have questions for me, if you want any other organization that you might belong to have a master gardener talk to you about his favorite topic, these are the ways to contact us. Different to other places where you get information, we give you information that comes from the university through research, and we don't try to sell you anything. So we're from the government, you can trust us. So this is the title, and my favorite part is the magician part. And when you make compost, you help nature, and maybe nature feels like you can be a magician because you can turn what other people might look at as garbage, you can turn it into the best product that you can use in your soil to make the soil healthier and the plants healthier and the entire planet healthier. So just for a second, we're going to talk about soil basics. It's very important, obviously. Great talking to an organization like you dedicated to plants, because you already have a lot of knowledge, and it's just a reminder that in the garden everything starts in the soil and everything ends in the soil, and that's nature in action, moving through and coming back. For just a general idea, a typical good soil will be made out of these components: water, air, half of it, and then you have obviously minerals, and there's a 1 to 5% organic matter. And in that organic matter, you have a lot of very interesting characters that just work for you, work for us in processing organic material that was alive at some point, and now it's going to be turned into their basic components so plants can reuse them. When I talk about soil, it's that soil under your feet. You have to, and this is one way to look at it, it's you're stepping on like a super huge and complex city with all kind of buildings and channels and bridges and doors and compartments. And the way the city is built is by organizing the particles in that soil to provide a way for air and water and materials and live things to move back and forth. It's not a block of concrete, it's not a block of cement. It's open, there's movement everywhere. And the most important thing that you need to keep that structure working under your feet, obviously the microbes and organic matter. When things die, plants or animals, on the surface of the soil, they start immediately breaking down. Imagine if things that die around us wouldn't break down. Impossible, right? So they have to break down. And they have to break down because those materials, a lot of those materials have to be reused. The interesting thing about what happens when organic matter breaks down, what is it that you get? Well, those are the numbers. It's just a percentage of organisms that are alive. A percentage of that organic matter that goes into the soil is dead. And some of that organic matter that is released into the soil is very dead. And when you say very dead, it might be thousands of years. Those are particles that don't break anymore. They'll be reused. They're very important in helping forming the structure of the soil and also holding on to nutrients, but they don't break down anymore. And things will be reabsorbed, reused, and the cycle will continue. Very interesting. We don't have much time to go through the soil food web, but I'll tell you that in nature, everything eats something, and something will be eaten by somebody else. And in the process, energy is transferred, nutrients are released, and it goes all the way to us. And that's going on, most of it under your feet all the time. We all have to eat. And plants, they need 16 essential nutrients. Most of the components of a plant, if you could analyze that, will be just carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, and they're not minerals. Then you have some other minerals that are used in in higher amounts, like nitrogen, the famous NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and that's what's in bags of chemical fertilizer that you buy at the store, right? NPK, those three numbers at the front. But plants also need a lot of other nutrients, maybe in small quantities, but according to the law of minimum, from all these essential nutrients, if one of them is not available for the plant, that will limit the growth and production of that plant. And one good way to obtain all the other micronutrients that are not present in those commercial bags of fertilizer is definitely organic matter, organic fertilizers. Nitrogen is the one we all know, right? Nitrogen is so important. It's the one that turns your grass green, allows plants to grow really fast. Nitrogen is a bad boy, doesn't want to stay still. He wants to go all the time, back to the air. It is the major component in the atmosphere. And nitrogen enters the soil in a lot of different ways, including you applying fertilizer, lightning, just the gas from the gas in contact with the soil. And then, of course, microbes, again, microbes working, they'll move the nitrogen around and make it available for the plants. It's a very interesting and complex cycle, but I wanted to mention that because in the case of your garden, your vegetable garden in particular, you're buying tomato plants and peppers and eggplants, and those are very or highly selected plants to perform, to produce, and you definitely need to feed them. You need to feed them, and you need to make sure that when you feed them, the soil, it's going to be able to handle those nutrients and allow the plant to use them. And if you don't do that, you don't have a healthy soil that is able to handle the nutrients, plant is not going to get the maximum nutrition. And imagine poor Usain Bolt not being able to eat. Obviously, it's not going to be able to win. So if you want Olympic winner plants, you need to feed them, and you need to feed them properly. For those of you that never done a soil test, it's useful because it tells you the nutritional status of your garden. And if you're planning on adding nutrients, well, it's not expensive. It's very, very easy. Send a sample. It'll tell you where your soil's deficient in this and that, or maybe the acidity is slightly off and that's not allowing the nutrients to be absorbed or become available, and things like that. So it's a good tool to find out what's in your soil. We all, for the most part, fertilize our plants. Some use chemical fertilizers. I don't. I've been off the chemical fertilizers for a long time. I only use organic fertilizers and a lot of compost. And I saw this and I love it because the message is so important. But I have to say that that's not me. And I know that's not me for two main reasons. I don't have a broadcast spreader. I found many years ago that that's, even for a medium-sized yard, that's unnecessary. You should stuff all over the place with that. I switched to a handheld, which I can control better. So that's one reason that's not me. And the other one is that you'll never catch me with shorts and black socks. Even when I have relatives and friends that do that, you'll never catch me out like that. But the message is so important. When you're fertilizing, you're not just fertilizing the lawn. And for you in Clear Lake, with all the water and nature in close contact with you, you have to be even more careful with the way you use fertilizers. Good idea when you're starting a garden here in the Houston area. Most soils in the Houston area don't drain well. It's just what we have. So always raised beds are recommended. And best time to improve the soil is when you're building your bed. Different products that you can use from sand. Actually, you can use a mix like a rose mix, which is already a combination of different things that provide a relatively good soil. You can add more compost and make it even better. So don't waste that opportunity. If you're planning on starting a bed, remember you're going to have to raise it, and that's the best time to mix it up and add all these amendments to make it a better soil. Sometimes we buy a house, move to a new house, we already have grass, and that grass might not be very happy. First thing I will do, especially if you suspect that they weren't taking good care of that grass, add organic matter. Aeration is a good thing to break the hard pan, but if you don't want to do that, just add 1/4 inch or so of compost over the grass a couple times a year, and the soil is going to improve. And the organization of those particles, as we talked before, the structure of the soil will be improved, and everything is going to work better. So we're going to jump right into composting. Compost is just the end of the breaking down process. Is what everything turns into. And in nature, it's very slow. Nature is composting all the time, but it goes too slow, and we don't have that much time. We need to make it go a little bit faster so we can enjoy it while we can. It's just the right thing to do, to compost organic materials, plant materials, especially. When you see that, this is at the Jersey Village, very close to my house here. It's a beautiful subdivision, very old, with a lot of huge oak trees. And every spring, this is what you see. I wish I could pick it up, all of it, and turn it into compost. Obviously, I can't. That's just a lot of brown leaves that they're going straight into the landfill. So when you compost, when you make compost, you're recycling, and you're just following nature's way of returning these essential nutrients and components to the soil, so the soil can do its job and keep the microbes along with that organic matter working to keep your soil and your plants healthier. I like to say that there is no better compost than the one that you make at home, if you can, because not everybody can make it their own compost. If you can, then, well, we have good commercial compost here in the Houston area that you can get it from. And of course, it is free. What could be better than free? A little bit of work. Let's say it's just a little bit of work. When I put this presentation together, it was basically answering questions at the Extension Office compost demonstration garden. And for some reason, the number one question is always, how can I make it go faster? I guess we want it now, right? Well, I make compost all year long, and usually I need more compost early in the spring for my vegetable beds and when I'm cleaning the other plants. And of course, a little bit later in the summer, earlier in the fall, so I can do my next planting season. So I'm not in a big hurry, but yes, I can make compost in a hurry if I need to. So we're gonna go really fast over these 5 aspects of composting that you can improve and make your compost pile go faster. We're going to talk about containers and temperature. We're going to talk a little bit about CN ratio, which is just a way to balance the materials that you put in your pile. The importance of the surface area, meaning if you reduce the size of the materials that you put in your pile, things are going to go much faster. Aeration and moisture. Containers. Container or no container? The traditional pile is not really a container, but in this urban environment that we live in, it's just easier to keep things in a container. This container is the size of a cubic yard, and to make this size container, which I'm going to show you in a second, those instructions are in the notes that I sent Debbie, so she'll make them available. There's some notes for this presentation and a couple of recipes for you to cook your compost. And this is very hot. And this is maybe 4 days after this pile was put together. Smaller size containers, less than a cubic yard, the heat is going to be generated, but most of it is going to be lost. And we want to favor a specific group of bacteria that just love the heat, because they're very good at breaking down the materials. They're the heavy hitters. They're called thermophilic because they love the heat. And so we want to favor them. And in order to do that, definitely we need to mix the materials right and provide the microbes with what they want. And that way we can promote those heavy hitters as soon as we can and move the pile along. Even ugly containers are fine. My wife will never allow me to put one of those in my backyard. But so many different containers. This is my favorite. And I can mention that it's 3 feet tall and 11 feet long, and you tie it at the ends. And there you go. You have a little around a cubic yard, 27 cubic feet in there. Commercially available containers, very nice. I love this one. It's collapsible, easy to move, very sturdy. This is a kind of metal with a plastic coating. Different containers, tumblers. The one at the bottom left, it's a little bit different, where you add the materials at the top, and eventually after a while you start pulling them at the bottom, screen them, whatever it's ready you use, whatever it's not you return it. It's just a little bit different. Whatever container you choose, you have to make sure you can use it, that you can handle it. That tumbler was donated to us at the extension office because it was at a nursing home and they couldn't turn it, imagine. So whatever you're going to use, just make sure you can handle it. And the size, I don't know why everybody wants to have a huge container. And I'll tell you, I use this cubic yard size, and sometimes I just don't feel like doing it. The bigger your container, well, the more work you're going to have to invest. Very nice. I built that one. It's not that hard. All kind of ideas in the internet about containers. If you don't want to use a container, you can bury the materials in the ground. It's called trench composting, and you just plant on the side, and you see the materials were buried in the center. At the end of those are tomato plants. At the end of the tomato plant, you just pull the tomato plants, put them, chop them, put them back in the compost, turn the dirt, just build your banks on the sides and start burying material for the next season. That's just very easy to do. Cardboard box is good enough. Since you live, I assume, in the NASA area and you have access to alien technology, you can probably get one of those strange things as well. Okay, CN ratio. CN ratio, whenever you read about compost, you're going to find this CN ratio. That's just a relationship between carbon and nitrogen. How many carbon particles are there for every one nitrogen particle? It's useful because it allows us to balance these materials that we're going to put in the pile to a relationship, a balance between carbon and nitrogen that the microbes are going to like. Remember, everything we do is for the microbes. They're going to do the job for us. And they like it when the carbon to nitrogen ratio is steady to 1. If you look at a vegetable from your kitchen that you put in your container and it's going into the pile, that one, for example, vegetable waste will have 11 carbons per 1 nitrogen. And you can find this carbon to nitrogen ratio, CN ratio, for, I'll say, thousands of different materials. I always use the same things. I use what I have at home or what I can have access to, which is kitchen scraps made out of mainly coffee grounds, vegetable waste, and of course I have St. Augustine grass. And those will provide me with materials that are kind of rich in nitrogen. So to balance those nitrogen-rich materials, you need to mix them with then carbon-rich materials. And you have, in my case, it's always dry leaves. I don't have pine needles. And sometimes a newspaper if I run out of dry leaves, which I'm always collecting. And some materials are basically already balanced, so you don't have to do anything. They're almost there. That 30-to-1 is the ideal ratio, but if you get close, not even close enough, just around those numbers, things are going to go fine. The closer you get to the 30-to-1 ratio when you mix your materials, the hotter the pile is going to get and the faster the process is going to go because you're providing the microbes with what they want. And if you have other materials, because I'm going to give you a couple of recipes, I like to say that making compost is like cooking, and I'm going to give you a couple of recipes and you can try those and make it better. Just keep playing with it until you make that recipe better, and then you can pass it down and tell everybody it's your recipe. But if you have other materials that I don't use and I'm familiarized with, you can use this. You can Google compost mix calculator. Washington State has a great one. I love it. And you might have poultry manure, you might have rabbit manure, you might live close to a place that they process onions and you get all the skins. I don't know, you can find a way to balance those materials to provide the microbes with the amounts that they prefer. So for those of you that have a lot of materials at home, I guess you collect your kitchen scraps from all your relatives, and you can fill a 33-gallon garbage can full of kitchen scraps. Well, this is basically how you mix it with shredded brown leaves just to fill one container in one day if you have that much materials. I used to do that, but my kids, I have 4 kids and they all went to school and they're not here anymore. So now I'm down to just a small way of doing it. I have a kitchen container, which I'm going to show you in a second. And every time it's full with kitchen stuff, I go and put it in the pile and cover it with a bag and a half of brown leaves. It's a good recipe for you. Most people, that's what they're going to have to do. If you're dealing like with grass and you have a lot of grass, and let's say, and you have a lot of brown leaves, it's great. With grass, you see, grass doesn't have as much nitrogen as kitchen scraps. So with grass, let's say San Agustin fresh, just cut it and put it and mix it. You can do layers of 2-3 inches of grass, and then basically the same amount or 1.5 times the amount of grass. So let's say 1 bucket of grass and 1.5 bucket of brown leaves. And when you keep building your pile, that's going to be very close to 30-to-1. So this is what I have at home. That little container is 0.2 of a cubic foot. That's the volume inside the container. And when it's full, I take it to my pile and then 1.5 bags of shredded brown leaves. And that's perfect. That's close to 30-to-1, and that's going to get really hot. A lot of things that you should not put in the pile, especially large amounts of oil and grease, feces. I don't know why you'll do that. You know, things that might attract critters, depending where you are and what kind of container you use. I'll tell you, small amounts of oils, the microbes are going to take it. But if you put a large amount, then you're going to suffocate them. You're going to cut the air and you're going to kill them and slow down the process. And then it's going to smell bad and you're going to have all kinds of problems. All the things from the kitchen. Eggs do not participate in the carbon to nitrogen. They're not carbon rich or nitrogen rich, but they are rich in so many other components of the total equation. So yes, you can definitely put eggshells in the pile. And remember, the microbes are going to be doing the work. They're your workers. You hire them. So every so often, just a little bit of appreciation will go a long way. They'll be happier that they're recognized as the ones doing the job. It's not you, it's them. So take a minute, present them with a nice minute proving that you do care for them. Obviously, this is where they go. You see, this is a pile that I'm working on, adding materials. Next thing, I'll cover it up and water it. This is every time I do that. You see, the point is, whatever you add to your pile, either when you build the entire pile or if you are building it like that, depending on, again, on what the materials that you have, everything you put in the pile needs to be balanced. A big mistake, you start your pile and then you add a lot of, let's say, brown leaves because that's all you have. Okay, well, that's not bad, but it's going to be very slow because the microbes don't have what they want. Same thing with a lot of kitchen scraps or a lot of grass and no carbon for the microbes to use for energy. That's bad. That's going to be bad. It's going to smell bad. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. That's just grass that I cut. I went and cut some grass that day because I wanted to finish the pile, covered it up with something else, and boom, that pile is ready. I'll keep checking the temperature on it and keeping it moist. And very soon it's gonna, 2-3 months down the road, it's gonna look like the one on the right, which has been sitting there for a long time and it should have been screened a long time ago. Maybe I was playing too much golf around that time. Sometimes, and this is going to happen, it doesn't matter how much you save brown leaves, which I'm always saving brown leaves, you might run out, be short on brown leaves. You can use other sources of carbon. Shredded paper, just a tip, when you're going to do that, kind of mix brown leaves and shredded paper. Shredded paper is very high in carbon, but it won't release it as easily as shredded brown leaf. Just understand that the microbes are going to be working on the surface of the material. So if you break the materials, then you increase the surface and more area for those microbes to work at and make things go faster. So shred whatever you can. Shred it, break it, step on it, hit it with a bat, just whatever you can do to reduce the size of the materials. Some materials are easy to break by the microbes, some are harder, but if you help by breaking them down a little bit, definitely it's going to help. I use a mower. I don't have a shredder anymore. I have a lot of cannas. I love cannas because they're hard to kill. I pick up my grass clippings. I use them as a source of nitrogen in my pile, and then I return the compost to the grass. It's just easier for me. Just a tip, I have killed a lot of garden snakes. They're always hiding under the leaves. So before you do that, move them with your rake and make sure there's nobody under the leaves because it feels really bad. Air in the pile. So the microbial activity that we want to encourage in our piles is definitely an air, full of air activity. It goes faster if they have enough air. You won't have problems with bad smell or anything like that. Unfortunately, if you do a good job in mixing the materials, and the microbes are going to be very happy, they're going to work really fast, and the size of the particles is going to be reduced, and it's just going to get compacted, and that will cut the air. So then it's time for you to turn your pile in. And turning the pile is always a pitchfork is king, but there are many other ways of doing it. And you need to bring air again in the pile. You definitely want air in the pile. Different ways of doing it. Use that auger with an extension and a drill, because sometimes, well, I used to have 3-4 piles going at the same time, and it's a lot of work, and I want to play golf so I can get hurt. So that's a useful tool if you have a big pile or more than one pile. Other than that, pitchfork is king. Moisture, it's very important. Remember, microbes, you don't want to dry them out. 30 to 70% is the range, and still they'll be working. Stick your hand in it, squeeze some of that material. You want to feel that it's wet, but it's not going to drip any water. If it's dripping water because it's been raining a lot, well, time to turn it to move that water, a little bit of water out. Too much water will definitely displace the air, and we'll go back to they need air. Another common question, when is my compost ready? Well, it is ready when you cannot tell what the original materials were. It's very simple. All kind of other definitions, scientific definitions. You don't need, you just need to, if you stick your hand in that pile and you keep looking at it and you say, wow, this looks like dirt. Okay, you're done. So I like to screen my compost when it's finished, because a lot of the materials are not going to break down at the same speed. So some of the material, most of it is going to be finished, let's say, but you screen it, and whatever goes through the screen, it's compost and it's ready to be used, put in the soil, potting soils, and whatever other ways you can use it. And we're going to mention a few. Whatever doesn't go through the screen, guess what? That is also useful. That is, it's not compost, it's not ready to be used by the plants, but it's useful because it's been partially composted. It's just, it's not ready yet, but it's still useful because then you can use it as mulch And mulch has its use on the surface as a blanket, as a protective layer on top of the dirt. No naked dirt. That's a gold rule. Dirt has to be covered either by plants and if not by mulch. See, I'm just screening the materials. I mean, screening the compost, the finished compost. That, it didn't go through the screen. So I'm going to use that for mulch. And this is where you put it on the surface as a protective layer. And multiple benefits. Reduce evaporation, reduces the impact of the rain, weed control. I mean, a lot of benefits. And that is compost. And that's going to be either mixed in the beds or used on top of the dirt or potting soil, whatever. I don't know if you can tell that there are some white spots on that pile of finished compost, and those are eggshells. Never seen commercial compost with eggshells. If you see commercial compost with eggshells one of these days when you're around, call me and let me know, because I've never seen it. Yeah, obviously that is homemade. So what are you going to do with all that compost? Well, when you prepare your beds for your flowers, animals, or even preparing beds for perennials, then it's a good time to add compost. Potting soil should be at least 4 months. And some people say 20%. I sometimes put more, but 20% is a good number. Top dress your turf, as we mentioned before. 1/4 of an inch is all you need. Do it every so often, and your soil is going to change. It's going to be way better. If you improve your soil, the health of your grass is going to improve, and you're not going to need all the other list of products, chemicals that you need to deal with your grass because it's not healthy. So you just compensate it. Make the soil healthy, and your grass is going to be healthy. Deep root feeding, I've done that for my trees, especially when I first moved into this house, and it was recently after construction, and it was a hard pan, soil everywhere, and my trees really benefited from it. Put it in a bag, bring it as a gift, compost it. Imagine next party you go, instead of a bottle of wine, just bring a bag of compost. Don't be surprised. I do all my seeds in compost, and when I transplant, move the seedlings, I also use compost, and then from there they go into my beds that have been enriched with compost as well. It's good for potted plants. Remember that potted plants live in a captive, abnormal, strange environment. Adding compost every so often makes it better. It's also good for potted cats. This is what I'm doing, getting ready for tomato season. I use a tiller. One thing I'm trying to change the way in my practice is no tilling. Unfortunately, I have all kind of roots, as you can see in the tiller's blade, all kind of roots getting there, trying to steal my precious soil. So I do have to till a little bit, but I'm working on it. I'll let you know next time we talk. Compost tea, I have tried before, and not something I do all the time, but for some of you, it might be a good idea. And then you spray it on the plants. It's an easy way to spread the good stuff, the benefits of compost on your plants. So where's the compost? Where would you place your compost? The perfect location. This is my southwest corner of my yard. The banana, those are ornamental bananas. Are really tall, and they provide me with excellent shade, and they're on the west side. Imagine. I don't see why you place a compost bin in the middle of the yard under the sun and go and work it in July. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm surrounded by plants. The evergreen gives me a kind of coverage, and back there's my workstation, my compost station. Those bananas, when they die during the winter, in the spring, like now, I'll go and chop them, and they go in the compost too. Vines and things that can throw seeds into your compost, that's probably a bad idea. I got rid of that vine, which I like it, but it's causing me a lot of problems. Hopefully you're not sleepy yet. If you never try, I don't know why, it's not hard. Making compost is very easy. Follow the recipes, try it again, change this, change that, stick to it. It's gonna work, It's been called a miracle drug for a long, long time, and it is. If I have one product I can use in my yard to make my plants healthier, I'll just add compost, don't do anything else. Enjoy your yard, I enjoy mine. My kids grew up in this yard. Now my grandkids are running around in this yard. I want it clean in terms of health. It's not the most beautiful yard, but it's healthy. There are no chemicals in this yard, nothing other than natural stuff. And for them to enjoy and for me to know that they're going to be enjoying it and be fine. I think we're done, Debbie. So what are we going to do now?
So I'll go ahead and play the demonstration video.
Okay, very good.
How to build a compost pile. This is very practical. This is very easy. You don't need to know much about composting. You don't need to know much about carbon, nitrogen. You don't need to know much about microbes or anything like that. This is very practical. We're just going to build a pile. I'm sure you all have yards or you have access to your neighbors' leaves and the grass and all these simple materials that you can mix together and make compost. The most important amendment that you can use for your yard. I always like to say that making compost is like cooking. And you might have received some recipes from your grandparents make cookies and things like that. And composting is just like that. And I'm going to give you 2 recipes while we build this pile. So the first thing we're going to do is use a container. In our urban environment, it's probably better to have a container. Sometimes you don't need a container. You just throw all these materials and eventually they'll turn into compost. That's how it happens in nature. But in the backyard, you probably need a container. This is my favorite container. 3 feet tall, 11 feet long, makes a cubic yard inside, and that's my ideal size for it. First thing I want to do, and I'm always collecting little branches, because I want to make sure that I have good drainage. So that's the first thing I'm going to add to this pile. At the bottom, all these little branches that will help ensuring good drainage at the bottom. Remember this plastic here, and it's just out of convenience because I'm going to wrap it up when I take it home. So there's not going to be that at the bottom of the pile. The pile is going to be in contact with the dirt, and then that will be your first layer. Just small branches. They're not going to break down completely. No, it takes longer for branches to break down, much longer than the leaves and the grass and the kitchen scraps. But at the end, we're going to screen it. So once that's there, I always like to put a little bit of just thin layer of leaves. And now we're ready to start adding. First thing we're going to add is grass that I cut from my yard yesterday. So what we're going to do, we're going to mix it. And the ratio, and this is a recipe if you want to call it that way, for every container of freshly cut grass, you should add like 1.5 to 2 containers, same container, of shredded brown leaves. So put a little bit more brown leaves in there. Okay, and this is 1 container of grass. You just make layers. 2, ooh, this is warm, nice and warm, 2-3 inches. Rest of the bag. Well, obviously I'll be using a pitchfork if I was working on my piles. Okay? If you have enough brown leaves and grass to keep going, keeping the same proportion, 1 container of grass, 1.5 to 2 containers of brown leaves, you can fill it up. Every time you add brown, you go ahead and water it, like now, and I should have done it before. You get it wet. And if you have enough materials, just finish up your pile, and great. It'll just go from there. Not everybody has enough materials to just finish up the pile at one time. A lot of us have to just bring, when we mow the grass, then we bring grass and we add it to the pile. And we have kitchen scraps, especially at home. We have kitchen scraps in the container like this, which is very practical. So when we have small amounts at a time that we can add to our pile, the one we're building, the most important thing is that whatever you add to the pile, it's balanced in terms of the brown materials, which are carbon-rich materials, and the green materials, which are nitrogen-rich. So if what you have is kitchen scraps and you have saved brown leaves, the second recipe is just kitchen scraps, 1 container, and 1.5 bags of brown leaves. Always add the kitchen scraps first, right? It makes sense. And then cover them up with the brown leaves. It keeps the flies away, all the other critters that might want to go and check what's in there. Actually, we have a little bit more here, so let's just put it in there too. There you go. And we're going to cover it up. With brown leaves, and we're going to water it again and get everything wet. Years ago, I used to have a homemade device to water my piles. It was just a 3-gallon bucket with a bib and a hose with holes, and I will just sit it on top of the pile, and every so often just open it up and let it drip slowly. Because you'll be surprised when you use your handheld shower spray. You might spend a couple of minutes watering the pile, and when you come and check and stick your hand, it doesn't go that deep. Most of it just runs away. So a slow drip is better. But in the last few years, I have found that for the most part, I don't have to water my piles. We have kind of a consistent rain that it's enough to keep your piles with enough moisture for the microbes to work. So we could probably add a little bit of kitchen scraps and a little bit more brown leaves if we want to get it to the top. But as far as I'm concerned, this pile is finished and ready to go.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify something. Do you have to use shopping bag size or containers?
It's what you have, whatever containers you have. It's a matter of proportion. In the case of the grass, remember 1 paper bag of grass and 2 paper bags full of brown leaves. Well, if what you have are containers like this one, then it's 1 of grass, 1.5 to 2 of the same container. So whatever volume, 1 part, 1 container, 1.5 to 2 on the brown leaves to keep the ratio, the proportion. And the reason why we do that is because the microbes that are going to be doing the job of breaking down all these materials in the pile, they love that ratio. At that ratio, when you give them that, they're very happy and they work faster in breaking down the pile. One thing that it's good advice is collect brown leaves. Become a collector. And if you can steal them from your neighbor, do it. Especially when they're dry, you can shred them or just leave them, shred them later. As long as they're dry, put them in a bag and save them. Because one of the problems that we're going to have here in the Houston area very, very soon is that everything is going to be green. You're not going to find brown leaves to provide the carbon. What happens sometimes, and thank you for your question, because I always want to mention that when you run out of brown leaves, even when you save them, you might run out of brown leaves. There are other sources of carbon. I'm just using brown leaves just because it's very common. But for example, shredded paper can be a good source of carbon. Actually, it has more carbon per unit than brown leaves. The difference is that it doesn't break down as quickly. It won't participate in this bacterial activity releasing carbon as fast as brown leaves. So save some shredded paper too. If you're running kind of short on brown leaves, start mixing it. And that way you'll benefit from both. One is going to be used first, the one is going to be used a little bit later. Same with brown paper bags like this, an excellent source. Shred them, get them wet, and use them as a source of carbon for your mix.
But you advise if you're using paper to mix the paper with the leaves, does not use paper by itself.
Exactly, because for example, a little piece of wood has an amazingly high content of carbon, but it's not going to break down right away compared to a sycamore leaf or something shredded. So when doing that, and a lot of people uses wood shavings and things like that from their shops, it's great, but better if you have another faster releasing carbon combination will probably be better. If not, it's not that it's not going to work. It's going to work. It's just that it's going to take longer.
Okay.
And we all want things to go
Quickly.
as fast as
Instant gratification.
There you go.
Okay, so imagine this was now full. Do I just leave it alone until it's ready, or am I supposed to mix it up every now and again?
Once it's full, you water it every so often through the process. There's good moisture. Obviously, there's plenty of oxygen in there for the microbes. Along with that question goes, do you need to add microbes to it? No, there are millions and billions of microbes there. They know exactly what they have to do. You don't even have to explain anything to them. Just get it wet, get it ready, and different ways of doing it. Most people just leave it a couple of weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, and then they start turning it because they assume that the pile must be running out of oxygen and they want to check for moisture. Another good way, which I rather do, is to monitor the temperature in the pile. As the microbes break down these materials, energy is going to be released, and we can measure that. Not only it's good to know what's going on inside that pile, it's also a way to know if you did a good job or not in mixing the materials. And when you get to that right point, the temperature is going to get very hot. In a few days, 2, 3, 4 days, it's going to be over 120, hopefully all the way to 150, and stay that way for several days. And the other way then will be when it starts going below 120, 110, obviously the pile is telling you, I need something, and that might be a good time to turn it, check it for moisture. If you just want it wet, not dripping, but wet, if needed, add more water. And keep doing that every 2-3 weeks until the pile is going to start going down. The size of the materials are going to get smaller and smaller. It might take a couple of months, maybe 3 months, 4 months is beautiful time for a pile to be finished. It's going to go maybe to 2/3, maybe half, depending how long you wait. And when you can't tell what the original materials were, and they look something like this, your compost is finished. In this case, actually, all this was the final product, and what I did, I screen it. I love to screen my compost. I think it's way easier to work with material that has been screened like this. And these other materials, mainly pieces of wood, harder leaves like magnolia leaves and even the oak leaves, are really tough, and they might take or need more time to break down. So I screen it, and this is going to be mulch. Actually, it was on top of my tomato plants this morning, acting as a cover, as a barrier, as a protective layer on top of the soil. My beds have been enriched with compost, and every time I pull a crop and I'm getting ready for the next one, I add more compost and more fertilizer and mix it in. So from the final product, when the pile is finished, you can get a little bit of mulch and your compost. Well, thank you so much. I hope everybody got a good idea on how to put together your pile.
We do have quite a few questions.
Okay.
First question, if you want to purchase compost, what brands can you recommend as safe?
As I mentioned before, in the Houston area, we have several companies that make very good compost. For many years, the standard has been Nature's Way. Mr. Ferguson does a great job with compost. It's very good quality. There's another company from the ground up. They make good compost, good products. Those are local companies, and I mean, other than that, sure, you go to the stores and you'll see, bags of compost from other companies. But I can tell you that those are good companies, and their products are very good. But remember, the best compost is the one you make at home. That's it.
We've had a couple of comments and questions about the rats and the snakes with the kitchen scraps. Is there any way to keep them out?
Other than a warning sign? Well, it depends where you are. It's funny. I don't have that problem, and I have a white oak bayou right behind me. I don't have that problem. Years ago, a family of possums moved to my yard, and they were always digging and stuff. So we just relocated them. You can if you have a tumbler, it's not an issue. You see, it depends what container you have. With the kind of container I use, if I have that problem, I will probably use wire that has smaller holes and put a lid on it, a wire lid, the same material. If I had that problem, I never had that problem. And again, use common sense with the materials that you add to your pile. But we throw everything. I don't throw my kids in the. Is that what I said the other day, Debbie? I don't throw my kids in the pile because they don't fit. Sometimes I feel like I should put them in there, but I put everything in the pile. Again, the container is the key. If you have the problem, or if not, well, then secure it.
Why are oak leaves and dry leaves different in carbon to nitrogen ratio?
Why are oak leaves? Well, oak leaves and brown leaves from the sycamore tree are probably, that's the same CN ratio. When you prune your oak tree and you throw branches and green leaves and you shred them, that is very close to, I think it's a 26:1 or something like that. So you prune your oak tree. We call it processing. My son Danny and I would call it processing. We get the machete and cut it in smaller branches that the mower can break. Pick it up, put it in the pile, get it wet, no mixing. There's a big difference between oak tree leaves and for example, magnolia leaves when compared to, let's say, sycamore trees leaves. The magnolia and the oak leaves are kind of tough. Even when they go through the mower, they don't really break that well. I mentioned the other day, I think when we were doing the recording, that some of the vacuum blower shredder little machines that could be electric or gas, when they suck those leaves, they do cut them into smaller pieces, which is great because, again, those are tougher materials, but if you break them down, they're fine. Okay.
So you mentioned droppings. What about chicken droppings?
They're very excellent, and I can't remember the value, but I tell you, you see they're probably like 8:1, 6. It's mainly nitrogen in there, so you have to be careful, of course, because you're going to need a lot of carbon. I mean, when we're talking by volume compared to just grass, it has a higher nitrogen content. And yes, the ideal one, rabbits and goats, are my favorite. I use them not here, but wherever I go, I make compost, and I have access to milk goats, and it's when that you clean the pen and they have hay, dry hay, and the feces. It's just an explosive mix. It's very good. But you need to. That's a good. You might want to check the compost mix calculator. If you Google compost mix, it's going to tell you how much compost to use on your in your garden. Compost mix calculator, and you'll get to the calculator, and you can plug in the amounts, an amount, and then it'll tell you how much brown material you need to mix it up to a 30-to-1 or close to 30. Okay.
Okay. Someone wants to know about the printer paper. Now, you did talk about composting and the regular compost, but what about vermicomposting?
Well, worm composting is a great thing, especially if you have a very small yard. They're very efficient. They're very good. The concentration of nutrients, if you want to put it that way, things are concentrated. It's like 11 times more nutritious, let's say, than regular compost. But it's the way I see it, when I have to spread compost over 200 square feet of grass, then it's just maybe not as practical. You need to keep those worms alive. It's the other thing. But for smaller yards and settings, it's great. And you can probably use kitchen scraps and just newspaper or shredded paper with the worm composting. I don't do it. Actually, I had done it, but I don't do it anymore. But it is great. It is another option for if that fits your needs to make compost. Yes.
Okay, and how can you avoid clumping in a tumbler container? So the compost is clumping.
It depends what materials you're using. If you're using grass, and using fresh grass, and you're not using enough leaves, and you're not mixing it well, it'll clump. It'll form those mats of grass, and they smell bad, and you have to go and loose them up. Other than that, I don't know. I never had that problem. The only clumping I get is when I don't do a good job with the grass, with the San Agustin grass clippings, especially when I don't use them the same day that I cut the grass. It's also, well, in a tumbler, it shouldn't be a problem because it's just so easy to mix. In the containers that I use, if I'm what I do, I try not to make the layers of grass too big. So it doesn't matter how many layers. It's just more work. But the grass tends to stick together, and that is a challenge. But it could be solved just by paying attention and use smaller layers so they won't happen.
Here's an interesting one. A compost pile that has caught on fire. How do you avoid that?
Compost, wow! Earth Living Technology had a place not too far from here, and I remember a few years ago they had a fire that took I don't know how long to. Well, obviously it's getting very hot. If you have a thermometer, I'd love to know how hot that is. So probably maybe you're using too much nitrogen-rich materials. Maybe you need to balance your materials a little bit better. My piles get to 160 and 165. It is recommended that if it gets really hot, that you add water and air and turn it. I don't really care because the microbes, you see, they work, they live in what they like, and if they don't like it, they just stop. So if you get to 165, I don't do anything about it. I just let them be. Whenever, I mean, they're not gonna be happy, so the temperature is gonna go down, and the process is gonna continue. That's it's not that I'm lazy, but I have other things to do too. But that's an interesting thing about that hot. I would think that probably the balance is what needs to be checked, and to get, you know, that hot to the point that it can ignite. It's amazing. That's I've never had that problem.
Okay, we have tons of crabgrass right now in part of our yard. Will compost help with this?
I guess crabgrass in growing in your St. Augustine grass. So if that's the case, the best weed, crabgrass is tough to start with. The best control, it's always to make your St. Augustine stronger. St. Augustine doesn't tolerate anybody else. The problem with that what happens most of the time is that the management of the St. Augustine grass is where it's sometimes wrong and needs adjustment. You see, St. Augustine grass is not meant to be cut short. Bermuda grass is meant to be cut short, like at the golf course, very short, but not St. Augustine. St. Augustine should be cut at the highest setting your mower can allow. I will treat those spots of crabgrass either by pulling them. I will help my St. Augustine grass to be stronger, and adding compost, of course, again, improve the soil, improve the grass. But the management of the St. Augustine grass is very important, and never remove more than 1/3 of the blade of St. Augustine. Stay away from chemical fertilizers. They create compaction, they hurt the microbes in the soil. Use organic fertilizers. Don't overwater. My sprinklers haven't worked for a couple of years now, and you know what? I don't need them. My St. Augustine grass in the front yard is very tall. It tolerates drought. It's healthy. No chemicals. It's managed properly, and I might see a weed or two. I never see. You know, I don't have a problem with weeds. St. Augustine will beat them every time. But try that. Try to improve your St. Augustine and hurt the crabgrass the best way you can, and allow the St. Augustine to take over. She's going to win.
Okay, so we have a viewer in El Paso, and they ask, what if you don't have any brown leaves?
Never been to El Paso, I should say, but I know what it is. What if you don't have any brown leaves? Well, use shredded paper, newspaper. It's just a source of carbon. It's going to be tough. It might not. The process might not go as fast as if you had the brown leaves, but it's shredded paper, pine. I guess not even pine needles, pine tree needles, but shredded paper. It should be an excellent source of carbon, and a lot of people, that's all they use. They have a small setup with kitchen scraps and shredded paper. They live in an apartment, a little container in the balcony, and that's what they use. So I don't see a problem, but I can tell you that it's not gonna probably get as hot or go as fast as if you had, you know, more brown leaves, which are so easy to break down. They break down so easily and contribute to the carbon equation with the CN ratio. So that shredded, very important, shredded, small pieces. Even if you use cardboard, which could be used too, small pieces. You don't want to create any barriers that interfere with the movement of air or water in your pile. So everything cut to smaller pieces, get it wet, very wet, and the microbes will take care of.
Okay, why do oak leaves take so long to break down? Is it tannin or just?
It's just that waxy. It's just the kind of magnolia leaves. I mean, dude, you put them in the pile and you see them again. It's they're tough. They're pine needles. The best use for pine needles is as mulch, and you can use it, without cutting them, or you can run your mower over, and they're easier to level, and they look very nice. And it's the best mulch, actually. It's sold commercially, bags of pine needles. But if you put them in the compost, even if you shred them, even if you put them through the mower, man, they take forever. It's just the amount of lignin it's just the composition of the leaf has materials that are harder for the microbes to break. They might take longer. It's all it is. They're good. They're not going to hurt anything. It's just going to take longer. I have a huge oak tree in the front yard, and as you saw at the video, those were the leaves I had available. So I use them all the time.
Okay, and what type of screen do you use to screen your
The wire? Yeah, I want to say it's a 1/4 of an inch, but it might be 1/2 inch. It's just a tip of your finger here, tip of your pinky fits in there, and that's it. Actually, what I screen it, that's my standard screen, and I think you saw it on one of the slides. But when I'm gonna use my compost for the seeds, then I put it through another smaller screen, really tiny. It's just easier for me to use it for the seeds. And actually, commercial compost, they tell you if it's like medium screen or fine screen. Obviously, it'll cost more for the fine because it's like a refined product. But for all users, common users, it's just, you don't even have to screen it. Actually, I have a wheelbarrow out in my yard that I needed the bin, so I just shoveled it. It's finished, but it's not screened. I shoveled it in a wheelbarrow. Got actually a wheelbarrow and a half. It's been sitting there for a long time, and I'm going to mix it in my vegetable beds like that. I'm not going to screen. But if you're going to mix it in your potting with enrich your potting soil, yeah, screen it. It looks better. And if you're going to put it in a bag bring it as a present, yeah, screen it. It looks better, definitely.
Okay, yes. And I think the last question is about cow manure. Is that okay to add, and how much is too much?
Well, cow manure is fine. I grew up in a farm. I'm not a cow, but I grew up in a farm, and my dad used cow manure mixed with all the dry grasses and stuff, put them to the side and let them be there. It's great. How much is too much? Well, again, it's very high in nitrogen. I can't tell you. It's probably like 9:1 in the CN ratio, but those numbers are available and you can find them easily, and go to the calculator and then check whatever carbon rich material you're going to use. But yes, they're high. All the manures. I use horse manure. It's so funny. What I did with horse manure, it's I used a screener, and with gloves I would just break it through the screener to kind of, so it will be easier to spread and to break down the manure. Cow manure, I have used it in it's basically the same, because if it's dry, you kind of break it a little bit, so it's easier to put in your pile. But yes, it's a it's a nitrogen rich material, and you have to mix it accordingly. And the compost mix calculator can help you with the amounts that you need.
Okay, that is all for the questions. We have a lot of folks thanking you for the great information.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful presentation and so much great Q&A. And I have a feeling you're going to get some more questions one-on-one because this is just a great topic. And I think you've got us all interested in getting out and getting our piles going. So
Very
thank you,
good.
Carlos. We'll report back next year and see how many piles of compost we accomplish based on your talk.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you so
Really
much.
enjoy it. Thank you.